U.S. Air Force thinks the future of air warfare is in collaborative combat aircraft, loyal wingmen drones that fly alongside jets they move into combat. There's a lot of questions, though, about what the concept of operations will look like and how the autonomy will play out. Breaking Defense recently gathered a group of experts to talk through some of these issues. Here's what they said. So one of the questions that, a CCA is a drone that flies with the plane. It sounds in some ways pretty simple, and I think people maybe think these things as almost, plug and play, and they're just going to fly along like something out of Star Wars or something. But the reality is this is a crazily complex technology to be able to do that while you're flying a jet, managing multiple systems, doing multiple missions. How is this possibly going to work?
They don't know yet. I don't know either, but there are some ideas floating out there, and I think the simplest way to think about it is the crewed fighter is going to be the quarterback and have these drone CCA loyal wingmen with him or her that are following the plays that the human calls. So generally going out and doing things. But as any fighter pilot will definitely tell you, it takes years to become a flight lead of like a force ship. There's a lot that goes into that, and there is a lot of sort of trust that the humans have to put into these machines that are going to be armed and that are going to be flying alongside them, that they're going to do their mission, that they're not going to crash into them, that they're not going to shoot them down by accident. I think of this sort of as a two-ship or a four-ship, where you have one crewed fighter and then a couple of drones with that person. And those drones could do all kinds of different missions. They might be conducting farther ahead surveillance in more contested airspace because we'd rather have them shot down.
Right.
They might be they might not even be armed, right? Largely acting as decoys and collecting the information and sharing it to the entire two-ship or four-ship. They may be armed with air-to-air missiles and sort of extending the range and the magazine depth of the fighter. We know that magazine capacity is limited on sort of the existing aircraft today. They also could be conducting air-to-ground missions. They might be serving as comms relays. There are lots of different things.
It's kind of,
that they can
in
be
theory,
doing.
at least on paper, right? It could be anything, is kind of the takeaway here. And so you can see why the Air Force would want these things, but to your point, they don't really have a plan right now, right? It seems like...
I mean, I think they certainly have a plan. They haven't shared it. My inference is that they're focused on air superiority right now and really like making this platform an extension of the F-35 in terms of helping it to gain air superiority and get into the future. But exactly what that entails and how they go about it is still a bit of a question mark.
How important is the autonomy going to be, and how do we think the autonomy actually is going, I guess, is a good question. Because we don't know, because it's so classified, where the state of play actually is on some of the stuff.
I mean, yeah, I think we don't really know exactly how things are going. It certainly seems like the Air Force is confident that things are going well. They're continuing to invest in this program, and they seem to be putting a higher priority on it compared to the manned next generation fighter. So that all bodes well for the development of autonomy. I think it has to be pretty sophisticated, though, because just the cognitive load on the pilot, you don't want the pilot in there with a bunch of different joysticks having to maneuver or direct a path for these different aircraft. You want to be able for, whatever AI to be able to do that themselves. And I think one reason that isn't talked about for that, for why that's so important is that, these aircraft, because they don't have a pilot in the cockpit, they might be able to maneuver in ways that you wouldn't be able to maneuver as a human being, in an F-35 or an F-15 or, in a next generation fighter. Like, maybe they can take on more Gs, they can engage in more risky maneuvers that a fighter pilot would not normally engage in. And so I think it's kind of like interesting to think about, could AI figure out how to fly these things better than a pilot could? And that not only takes away the cognitive burden, but there's an operational benefit for having an AI sort of direct this sort of thing.
And to Val's point, part of the problem that DARPA had to tackle was if you let an AI control a plane, how do you how do you make sure it knows flight controls well enough not to destroy the plane in flight, or something like that. So there's a lot of innovation that AI could offer, but it also has to do within the bounds of an airplane. Make sure that that can actually achieve that maneuver even if there's no pilot on board.
It goes even farther than that, right? Like AI is the special sauce. That's what's going to make this different than the Reapers or any of the drones that you see today in Ukraine or elsewhere that are all remotely piloted. And that is what the Air Force is betting on, because speed is so essential to their operating concept and their theory of victory, not just at the tactical level, getting ahead in the OODA loop, but sort of operationally being able to move and make decisions faster and get your adversary out of position. And I think that it's not just trusting that the autonomy is going to know how to maneuver the aircraft without crashing it, but trusting that they're going to interact with the human operator as well. And figuring out how you establish that is really the big, I think, bridge that needs to be crossed still.
CCAs are kind of going to go through the gauntlet next year because they're going to fly. Hopefully we should start, once prototypes start rolling off the line, they should hopefully be going to operators, people that can actually kind of put them through their paces and start to develop that trust, or at least that understanding of, okay, like this is how this performs. This is my understanding of what this is going to do if I give it this direction. Yeah. And I think it's just going to take a lot of time and a lot of flight hours for that to get worked out. I don't even know that I would categorize it fully as trust, just more of like a fulsome understanding about how this is going to behave.
One of the things about behavior is ethics. And Michael, I know when you guys interviewed Frank Kendall, the Air Force Secretary, recently, you asked him specifically about the ethics of this, because when people hear CCA, I think the obvious thing is the Terminators are coming, we're all going to die. And that's not really what the program is, but there's people who are in charge of making sure that's not what the program is. And Kendall's got kind of a unique view on this. Yeah,
Kendall is sensitive to this issue. He's a former human rights lawyer, and that's why I was interested in getting his perspective on it. And his answer was pretty candid, and it was, we don't really know yet. Mm-hmm. There's a specific accountability mechanism that has to be in place when something goes wrong. And his point was, who do we really hold accountable in that situation? Is it the person who pulled the trigger, maybe for lack of a better term? Is it whoever's job it was to supervise this process? Is it the designer of the software? There are a lot of ethical considerations that need to be taken into account before this technology can be employed responsibly. With the advent of AI, there's been a lot of attention on responsible AI use for good reason. The technology needs to come together, the ConOps need to come together, but the regulatory framework for actually ensuring that these are used responsibly, that needs to come together too.
I totally agree with that. And the department's policy is that this human judgment needs to be influencing any use of force, but that's a pretty there's a good bit of wiggle room within what that actually means. And I'm quite confident that to achieve the operational effects that they want with CCAs, they're going to have to be pretty close to fully autonomous. But that's not totally unheard of before for different types of systems that are more bounded and already fielded today. If it's firing a missile at something else without being told directly, just that it can hit this type of aircraft or this type of target. But it's not fully autonomous Terminator or Battlestar Galactica. Like, they're not coming for us yet. I do think that the operational demands, especially against a peer adversary where you're looking at a lot of jamming, really contested environment across all domains, is going to push you towards needing more autonomy, though.